Kurt, how are you?
Fine, how are you?
I'm good, and it's daylight over where you are. It's how are we now? 10 o'clock at night over here.
Oh my
We've
God.
been going strong since 12 o'clock midday,
Oh my,
and we've had people from all over the globe dipping into these sessions. So I know you have a wealth of experience in terms of ensuring people in the workplaces are respected so that organizations create systems to enable that to happen. And we're really looking forward to your presentation. Just one question, curiosity before we get going. So if there was one nugget of knowledge about you that we need to know before this session starts, what would that be?
oh my gosh. I teach Tai Chi. That's why I seemed grounded the other day, so maybe that's why I seem grounded.
Honestly, it was a feeling in the call together, and maybe there's a parallel between the teaching of it and the energy and the way you are.
Thank you.
I'm sure there probably is. So I'm going to now, I'll make you co-host,
Okay.
and I will pin you so we can all keep a eye on you there. And I'll unpin Steve. There we go. And you can share your screen when you're ready. And thank you so much for coming. We really look forward to this presentation. It's something different, and it's one of the content that I wanted definitely in the conference. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Kurt. I'm in Washington, D.C., and I really appreciate those of you who are staying online at this late hour. I look forward to an interesting conversation today. And also, I have a PowerPoint here with some voting technology, which I'm going to ask you to do, sign on with your iPhone so you can vote and we can ask the audience. I would like this also to be just a conversation, not a one-way dumping of knowledge or anything like that. It's nice to see Steve's presentation because I just turned into a senior this summer, and I retired a couple years ago, and so this is my second career, or third or fourth by this time. So, and I'm just very happy to be here and meet all these other interesting people who are participating today. So I've entitled my talk, The Business Case for a Respectful Workplace. And I know it's the program is about DEI. Just a little bit by me and why I chose this topic. And if I can get, okay. So as I said, I retired 2 years ago. Prior to that, I worked at the World Bank in Washington, D.C., in their ethics and diversity and inclusion offices. And I did things like write codes of conduct, and I taught courses on or workshops on ethics and conflicts of interest, sexual harassment prevention, unconscious bias, gender equality. And I went to 44 countries with the World Bank doing that. And the World Bank is amazingly diverse. It has people from 180 different countries, all very amazing. And it was really incredible. It's probably the most diverse place, one of the most diverse places you'll ever work. And just so many things. I'm from Indiana, which is in the middle of the heartland of the United States. And just to have that kind of exposure to different cultures, it was a vast, amazing learning experience for me. And my life really wouldn't be as rich as it has been if I had not had that experience. Also, when I retired a couple of years ago, I founded a company called Working with Respect with my wife, Laura Zam, who also does training on trauma recovery. And also she just wrote a book called The Pleasure Plan. So there's my contact information at the end. I also have a bibliography for this talk, which I'll be happy to share with anybody if they're interested in this, in the topic. So what I'm going to do is just see if the voting technology is working. So what I'd like you to do is pick up your iPhone or your cell phone or your Android or whatever you have, and go to the browser like Safari or Google and type in menti.com. If you want to put that in the chat box, that would be great. And then you have to supply this little code when it asks. It's 8771207. And when you do that, you should be able to start typing. And I'm asking just a kind of a neutral question. You know, we take surveys, recently I applied for a passport to go to Nepal, and I noticed that in addition to male and female, they had a couple of other choices, which I was kind of interested in. So I'd like you to see how you identify your gender. So has anybody voted yet? And if so,
it doesn't work. We don't have the space to digit the answer.
you don't have what?
The space to digit the answer. It is only submit without the possibility to insert the answer.
You're kidding. Well, I apologize for that. Well, that's going to make things a little bit different. Did anybody else have that same problem?
Yeah,
I
had
did,
the same.
Kurt. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Maybe the vote is closed.
Ah,
Check it from mentimeter.com from the slide.
okay. Let me just see. Try again. I'll try it one more time, and if not, I'll just go ahead.
We'll have to go back.
Pardon me?
Have to go back and put the menti.com.
Choices there. Yeah. Kurt, go back to that screen of the dashboard of Mentimeter.
Okay.
The dashboard.
Yep.
All right. So, what is your gender? It's and you selected the bars option.
Yeah.
So it needs to be a text option.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
It should have been a word cloud. Sorry.
Here we go. All right.
Yeah, there we go.
Ah, got it.
There we go. Thank you. I guess, Samira, you've done this before.
I love it.
Okay. Is it working now?
Yes. I think so.
There we go. So we've got one vote so far. And obviously, the more people that respond the same way, the bigger the choices come. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Kurt. Good to see you.
Nice to see you again. Oh, interesting. Somebody drew. Nice. Okay, I think we've only got 4 people on the call. So that's 4 people. Okay, so the technology is working. Okay, so what I want to talk about is just, you know, you all have probably been looking at the recent headlines in the past couple months, past 9 months, I guess, or 10 months. These are some things that I just pulled out of the news last week about gender, sexual harassment, unconscious bias, all the topics that I'm sure you're all familiar with. And just, you know, it just seems like we're in a real defining moment in the world right now where, you know, people have been working for about the last, 30, 40 years on diversity, inclusion, equity. It seems like this summer, and especially with COVID, things have really been crystallizing a lot more. And I'm finding a lot more tones in the, are you able to log in? Sorry, okay. You've seen a lot more tones in the a different tone in the news about why it's more important and more critical. Sorry, I just had an interruption there. What I want to ask you is how successful have your DEI programs been if you're working in this area? So not at all so-so, good, extremely good, superior. We've gotten perfect ratings. Three, so-so. Four, okay. So just really quickly, so-so. Anybody want to opine on why they think that might be?
So I think partly to do with what is a priority in the workplace at that particular time. That's one thing.
So do I hear you saying that there might be other priorities which seem to eclipse that, and sometimes you know, an initiative will come through and it seems to be, you know, the topic du jour. Like a couple of years ago we had Me Too and everybody was going on to sexual harassment training, and now in the wake of Black Lives Matter we have a lot of training going on around that. So yeah. Anybody else? Susan?
Yeah, Kurt, I think that a lot of times it's to tick the box, like put everybody through a diversity and inclusion workshop, and in a few hours, everybody is going to be woke, quote unquote. And it doesn't always tie to real transformational change in the organization, where all voices are really invited to the table and taken into account, and there's potential promotion opportunity, and you know, the good projects are also thought of, given to people who maybe aren't traditionally included. And so I think that's part of the issue.
Yeah. Okay. So the kind of tick the box, and I think that's fairly accurate. Samira, do you have any comments on this?
Well, from my end, I actually agreed, because that really resonated what Susan said. I've been just asked to do a couple of these type of workshops, and my question was, why is that? And one of the reasons, one of the clients said, it's required by an audited or auditing company. So they're following some rules, and that was interesting to see. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, especially I'm based in the United States, and most of it, what I watch about on the news in looking at US companies, a lot of it is compliance based, you know, and there's requirements to do this. A lot of people have annual sexual harassment training. And I'll talk about some of the other reasons why I think training fails. I want to just throw up a statistic here, which when I was looking for this, I was kind of, you know, you all said that your results have been kind of so-so. So I would say, don't feel bad, because really, you know, over the past 30 or 40 years, you know, the results on DEI have been pretty dismal in the United States as well. You know, every year, Fortune magazine publishes the Fortune 500 top performing companies in the United States. And I saw this report from 2014 that showed, if you look at these different groups of people, white women, Asian Americans, Latinos, African Americans in the workforce, you know, the numbers have actually been, you know, they've kind of inched up for women. For the other groups, it's kind of, you know, kind of flatlined. On some of the statistics I've seen, you know, if you keep following these projections, with women, if you said the goal is absolute, representational equality, you should have, 51% of leadership be women and 49% men. And if you actually look at this, 25 out of 500 is about 6% or something like that. And that was in 2014. So I looked up the latest statistics I could find somewhere else, and I found that in 2020, I could only find for African Americans and white women in the States, it's gone up to a whopping 38% or 7.6%. And for African Americans, it's gone down to 4 or 0.8%. I can't remember, I'm getting old. So I can't remember if I said that, if you look at those projections, it would take something like, we wouldn't reach parity for women until like 2100 AD. So like for another 100 years at this rate. So things have been pretty dismal and pretty slow. And in fact, some categories it's gone down, even in spite of things like Me Too and the things that we've been seeing this year as well. So I've got some theories about why this is, this is the case. But I want to ask you first what your experience has been with two things. One is, what's your experience been with these types of behavior in the workplace? If you're a HR person or an organizational development person looking at this, at work, have you witnessed any of the following: verbal abuse, threats, bullying, marginalization, public humiliation, etc.? So got one person say they're observing it now or have in the last year. Okay, so this is interesting. I did a training like this when I was in the country office in my previous job. And when we went and met with management first, they said, we know we have this problem with harassment in the office. And so we know that you're going to get, comments about this. Okay, so they know it was happening. So the question is, what have they done to address it? And we were doing, I had been part of a program to develop a mandatory sexual harassment training program for my previous employer. And so that was kind of telling. They said, yes, we know this is happening. And then I asked the question, the next question of the participants in the workshops. And it was nice because we had about 20, 30 people in the room. We had managers and staff there, men and women, foreign nationals, international recruited staff. And we asked this question: at work, have you seen any of the following unwanted behaviors? Remarks about one's body, requests for sexual favors, touching, staring at one's body, obscene jokes, etc. So, anybody want to vote on that?
Kurt, I tried to vote, but it didn't go through.
Oh, let's see. Oh, interesting. We've got 5 people. It says 5 people have voted. Ah, there we go. All right. So 2 people said yes, they're observing it now, and 3 yes, I have observed it, but not now or in the last year. And again, so we got kind of similar responses in that audience of the workers at that office, and the management had said beforehand, we know harassment's going on, but when they saw this, they were completely blown away. They said, we knew this was happening, but we had no idea this was happening. And they said, why didn't anybody say anything? So my theory and what I've seen is if you have one type of thing going on in the organization, you're having other types of things going on in the organization. And this is fairly well researched in the ethics world that says, if there's misconduct going on in an organization, if people are afraid of reporting it, it means that there's even more misconduct going on than you probably think there is. And here's my central proposition, and it's you can't have diversity, equity, and inclusion unless you build a respectful workplace. Okay, and I'm going to just talk about what my experience has been and how you can do this and what I've been looking at and seeing what's worked and what hasn't worked. And let me just stop there. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this so far? Yeah, Susan.
Well, I was just wondering too, respectful is a very big, weighty word and can mean different things to different people. So I'm wondering how you would define that, Kurt, and particularly given that this is a international crowd, what would be some of the cross-cultural aspects of that definition?
That's really good, excellent question. And in some of the training we've done, we've actually said that. We say, do you all know what it's been like to work in a disrespectful workplace? So what does a respectful workplace look like to you? So in the chat, if anybody wants to type in, what does a respectful workplace look like to you? I can't see the chat, but Claire's monitoring it for me and will tell me. What kind of behaviors do you see in a respectful workplace?
And while people are typing there, a respectful workplace for me is valuing everyone's differences, respecting equity, enabling people to be themselves, really. Mm-hmm. And then Susan's put in the box, everyone is valued for the skills and experiences and what they bring to the table, very similar. And Dr. Mohammed, accepting his or her different positions. Samira, no discrimination, respect for difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I think if you ask, when we asked the people, when I did these workshops, I don't know how many I did, many, and you get a list of the same types of things. So people know what it feels like to be treated with respect, I think. And that's really, I think, true cross-culturally as well. You know what it feels like to be respected, what your dignity is. It's kind of a core value. It's part of our inherent worth as, human beings. It's kind of like part of the Declaration of, International Declaration of Human Rights, what it is to be treated respectfully and to feel safe and secure in the workplace. So I think probably if you've seen some of the behaviors, some of you said you saw the behaviors, harassment or sexual harassment type behaviors in the workplace before. This is from a report in the European Union in 2018. So what are some of the indicators that you see in a disrespectful culture? And you can take a look at these. I don't know if any of you who are working in organizations or consultants to organizations, if your clients tell you that these are things that they're grappling with or they work with, or they are obviously things that need to tell us that are going on. But does everybody think that this is kind of representative of what you see in a disrespectful workplace? Or Steve, you look a bit troubled there. I can't hear you, but yeah, still can't hear you. Anyway, I don't know if I have.
One thing I've seen there, Kurt, is people using their own power to withhold information that actually has a knock-on effect for dependencies in other people's roles. Mm-hmm. It's sabotage, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, I don't know, you probably I don't know if you have seen the Gallup organization has been collecting information for the past 30 years on employee engagement. And so they got like 3 million data points or something like that over 30 years. And they find that only 30% of the workforce in the United States and only 13% worldwide of the workforce are actively engaged in their work. And that means that the rest are either disengaged or they're actively disengaged, which means they're sabotaging their work. So it's really not very productive. These are some of the behaviors you'll see. If we look at, there's another statistic from Gallup mentions these, but then also the Government Accountability Office in the United States government tracks this. And this is just for sexual harassment. But these are some of the things that you see. There are health costs, there are productivity costs, there are career costs associated with these kinds of behaviors. Legal fees, if a company is sued by an employee. One of the, it goes in the United States, we have the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission that can, so companies have to fight that in court. The government can bring a lawsuit and award damages. And all of these things affect the performance of a company, obviously. And Gallup says that this amounts to, in the United States alone, half a trillion or $500 billion loss, okay, which is just to all US companies, which is really quite staggering when you think about it, and that's just in the United States. Now, it's funny, when I was in my former employer, we had an ombudsman who used to work as kind of an informal conflict resolution person. And I was talking to him once about this, and I said, in the ethics office, for example, one of the things I do is investigate staff misconduct. So if somebody was alleged to have committed misconduct, you had to interview the people, interview witnesses, take people away from work. It took hours and hours and hours, arranging people's schedules, and then sometimes the person was found, to be guilty, and they might have been terminated, but they could appeal that and they could be reinstated. And if you just think about the money spent on that, I said, why doesn't, we have an organization full of economists, why can't they calculate the cost to the company of that? And this was about 3 years ago. And he said, well, they just kind of, that's overhead. That's not really, and I think, but I said, well, what about, the fiduciary duty, like in private companies to stockholders? And I found out, in some places, a lot of companies have liability insurance. So to them, it's not really it seems to be small change to pay for a lawsuit, for example, for sexual harassment or something like that. But this year, I've seen more and more in places like Forbes, people writing and managers saying and CEOs saying, hey, these are actually really substantial costs. And really, we are not honoring our fiduciary duty to our shareholders if all this money that we're wasting on this, if we're not actually doing something about this to address these issues. So my thesis then is the cure for this is respectful workplace behaviors, and we talked about what those might look like. And it's been fairly well demonstrated that when people feel trusted and respected at work, when they feel management is benevolent and has an interest in their personal growth, if they're worried about their safety and well-being, if they have concern about their work-life balance, people feel more empowered. They take more risks. They're more committed to the organization. You have less turnover. Staff are more productive. Actually, Yeah, I think I have another slide a little bit further on that talks about, how much that affects the bottom line. And there are some recent studies like by McKinsey that talks about, the value of a diverse and an equitable workforce. Any questions so far? Nope. Okay.
I've got a question, Kurt.
Yeah.
So one concern is having everything in place for the sake of audit and due diligence. And really, as I would say, being from the north of England, really going to town on it and having it as part of the way we do things around here, aligned to the organizational values. What can enable that shift?
Well, that's an excellent question. And that kind of takes me to the next slide.
Perfect.
So really, it's the article I was just reading this morning where I grabbed this picture. And also another article, a research study. It's really that senior management has to embrace that there is a business case for having a diverse and equitable workplace. And, we used to talk, when I started working in the diversity unit in 2004, everybody was talking about diversity, and everybody thinks about diversity as quotas and numbers. And then the focus shifted to inclusion. So once you have spent all this money getting the best people in the world to do the job for you from the best universities, and those kinds of things, if you put them into an environment and you don't value what they bring to the workplace, you're wasting them as a resource, right? You're not getting inclusion. So we have to kind of look at what are the structural drivers of that. And I always, I hate to beat up on white males here, except I feel like I can do that since I am one. We have to look at the tone at the top. In the ethics world, they say that the two people that most affect a person's ethical behavior in the workplace is senior management, how they behave, and then also your immediate line manager. So people see very quickly between what you say you're going to do and what you actually do as a role, as a person. It's like do as I do, do as I say, not as I do. And people really quickly see through that and they get jaded and cynical. And that also lowers productivity. There, on the right here, there's a quote by somebody who did a research just recently and looked at low sexual harassment firms as compared to higher sexual harassment firms that have high sexual harassment. And they looked at a lot of firms in the United States. And actually, if you go look at this study, they actually named names. The idea here is that, there's really a loss to shareholder and market value in companies that don't address these issues. So really, it's kind of incumbent on you as OD people to kind of make this case. If people say, how can we address this issue? It's like, well, you got to get serious about this and realize that, there is a fiduciary duty you have as a CEO. And that's one of the things I saw in one of the things I read this morning. But I think about it, I think what you were getting at also, Claire, is organizational culture. So let's say we want to take a look at organizational culture, and I found some research that talked about organizational cultures and organizational tolerance for harassment. When I was looking at those and the literature around this, we found that there were a lot of factors that resist change and kind of contribute to this. And there are things like weak organizational values, as I said, the tone at the top. You have to look at what kind of behavior is rewarded. Is it a rigid hierarchical organization? Is there a lack of diversity, lack of inclusion? Are people who do bad things held accountable? Is there active discrimination? Is there retaliation for people who speak up? Is there gender stereotyping in jobs? Are there gender pay inequalities? Is there an old boy network? So there's kind of the things that are drivers that kind of resist the change. And, you know, it's, in a way, it's, I was talking to my wife this morning, it's a power thing. You know, people who are in positions of power, like the status quo, it's been serving them pretty well. It doesn't really necessarily mean they get up in the morning and say, I'm going to be racist today or discriminate against people. But it's kind of like you always hear, this is the way we've always done it, and this is what works, and this is how you succeed. And, you know, they may have espoused values, but, you know, what is really rewarded in the workplace is what, you know, people end up doing, I think. So I hope, does that answer your question, Claire?
Yeah, it does. And there's another question in the chat box. So Dr. Mohammed has said, how does sexual harassment influence productivity and value of a company?
Well, productivity, you know, if I go back to that one slide that come from the Government Accountability Office, you know, a person who's being sexually harassed is obviously under a lot of stress. I've seen some studies that say that of women who have been harassed sexually, 95% of them have a subsequent PTSD episode. So if you think about things like absenteeism, sick days, if the company pays insurance benefits, if there's disability insurance and claims, all of those things are eating into, you know, obviously the profits of the company. So does that answer your question, Dr. Mohammed?
I'm sure that helps. And there's another statement here. Yes, it does, he says. And there's a statement here from Khaled Hamid. I think it must motivate others to grow. I think having inspiring talent will motivate others and help people to grow. Model displaced a circle with its main stages: planning, attracting, developing, retaining, and transitioning of people, whereas there is no standardized model for talent management.
Interesting. Yeah. So
Samira adds, and those behaviors might be symptoms in more conservative places.
Very interesting.
You know, what I meant here, Claire, is because here it's kind of difficult in this area for, you know, especially women to come, let alone men, but especially women to come along and say, I've been sexually harassed. But if we look at this at face value, if we have a lot of absenteeism, poor quality outcomes, low collaboration, it might be something to make us a little bit curious if those are the signs of such a behavior at workplace, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And there's even, I would add, definite harassment of men.
Oh,
and
yeah.
the same consequences in terms of absenteeism and so forth. Thanks, Samira.
Yeah, and it is very hard. You know, I was reading a quote by a guy who's a CIO, or he's a CEO of a company, and also he's white, and he decided to become the diversity officer also. And people said, well, how can you do that? You're white. And he said, well, I kind of represent the problem, so I need to get up there and be a role model and start helping, you know, and saying, look, we can't act this way anymore. We have to change this. Now, I know we're running a little bit short. I want to be mindful of your time. So
we're good.
Okay, so I want to just say, let's say you had to make, Samira, the case to management. So I think that you can always make the management whereby, like, appealing to, you know, the bottom line of the organization. So, you know, at some point, management does a cost-benefit analysis. You know, is it okay, are these problems we can sweep under the table or pay off, or have people, you know, pay people and have them sign non-disclosure agreements, or will our liability insurance cover it, and those kinds of things. So those are all costs that they look at, and risks they look at, and they might factor into, you know, should we, you know, go beyond just the check the box training, or should we do something else? And why isn't check the box training working, and those kinds of things. So I have a theory that, there's a very famous company that you might know of, the Weinstein Company, which kind of kicked off the Me Too movement a couple years back. And so, this guy, Harvey Weinstein, was a cash cow for the company. Everybody loved him. He made so much money for the company, mentored so many up and coming, directors and stars and things like that. But he had a real big problem, and it was really well known. But the company just kept saying, okay, we can pay off these women, get them to sign non-disclosure agreements. So they made this cost benefit analysis in their mind that, okay, we're going to make so much money off this guy anyway that we can afford this other cost. So I just want to say, where's the Weinstein Company now? Their cost benefit analysis didn't work out too well, did it? So I think we kind of need to remind people in management that these are kind of like the real risks. You can't just keep. And we also know from the past couple of years, looking at things like the issues, how people have been treated in places like Starbucks and McDonald's, what kind of reputational damage these things do to a company once it gets out into the workplace, out into the media, and with a 24-hour media cycle, how damaging that can be for a company's bottom line. The other thing that you can do if you're trying to make the case to management is to go look at what the business dividend is for having a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace. And McKinsey, I don't know if every year they do another report about women in the workplace. And they've been charting for about the past 6 years. They call it the diversity dividend, gender diversity and then ethnic diversity. And they found when they started out that companies that had better gender diversity in upper management did 15% better than their competitors in the marketplace. Now, 2019, it's up to 25%. So it's been climbing. Ethnic diversity, it was 35% in 2014. It dipped a little bit in 2017, but now it's back up to about 36%. So if you want to talk about making the business case, you can outperform your competitors. You're going to be, if you're known as being a diverse and equitable workplace, you're going to be able to attract better talent. You're going to get better outcomes from your staff. You're going to have less turnover. People want to work there. You're going to get reputational, dividends from that as a great place to work. There are organizations called Great Place to Work, which is partnered with Fortune 500, Fortune magazine, and they track what are the best companies to work with in the United States and in the world. So that's becoming part of the brand and the buzz of a corporation. So let me just ask you quickly, some of you said that your programs have been kind of so-so. Have there been any programs that have worked for you that you found that have been really effective? And this is also in the spirit of sharing with each other what kind of best practices we might have seen that worked. And then I'll talk about what we've seen in the, in some of the literature.
So one thing I'd like to share, it was around 8-10 years ago, and I was working with BNP Paribas across the Middle East, and they were moving their strategy to retail and investment to just investment. It was also a difficult time because of it was 2011. It was a difficult time because of the Arab Spring. They were potentially moving their head office from Bahrain to Dubai, and there was a lot going on in the region. The head office in France made the statement, good performance with bad behavior will not be tolerated. And that came from the top.
Yeah.
And our role was to get people on board the new strategy and to have sessions with around 25 at different levels in all the locations across the Middle East. And it was deep work, lots of discovery, and sometimes throwing the so-called, the plan, the curriculum out of the window, and change happened.
Mm. Yeah. And, you know, as we know, every culture is different. Every organizational culture is different. It's probably hard to find a cookie cutter approach for everything, but I think it starts with what you know, and what I've seen in the research as well in literature is that it starts with dialogue and really going out and having those tough conversations. So anybody else have anything else that worked as well?
Kurt, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to say is that I guess one of the rules you can apply is that the larger the organization, the more different subcultures they have, the harder it is to create a uniform sense of policy and ethics. I don't know whether you've ever come across the works of Hofstede.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Hofstede was an IBM guy who did a huge survey around all of the IBM countries all around the world and found a number of measurable characteristics of different company cultures. So actually, even with a smallish company with, say, different country operations, such as I had, you are going to find differences of culture which get in the way of these kind of diversity programs you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And even within different sectors and different disciplines, you're going to have those differences as well. Recently, I was on LinkedIn, and there was a woman who was she was at University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and she was posting a lot of things about gender equality and sexual harassment and those kinds of things. And somebody in her comment went after her. It was a guy, and it turned out he was an engineer somewhere. And there was a person following the thread, and you know, somebody said, well, how come you don't have more women in your area? Because he was really poo-pooing, you know, diversity and inclusion type activities. And he said, well, we'd hire more women, but there aren't any. And then there was a woman, a Black woman who was following the thread, and she said, you know, I'm a recruiter, and if you want, I can give you 10 resumes tomorrow if you really are serious about hiring people of color. So there's really a lot of changes that have to be, you know, there are cultural practices and norms and ways of behaving and ways of doing things. Getting cultural change is really, really difficult. And that's why one of the things, you know, when I worked in the ethics office, we had a code of conduct, and we did a whole values initiative to get everybody to embrace the organizational cultures. We did focus groups with people to try to find out what they believed in and what was important to them. There's been a lot of research on universal values and how, you know, people do have a core set of universal values. How they get enacted in different cultures are different. For example, everybody, you know, values family, but in some cultures where there's no social safety net, your family is everything. So your duty to your employer is secondary after your duty to your family. So you might do things that are not in the interest of the employer to benefit your family. And that can have, you know, it's not that, you know, people are evil, but just that's a matter of survival, that's how they survive. And we used to tell people in our workshops, you know, we can't tell you to turn against your family. However, you know, if that's a problem, you know, it's could be a career-ending move. So you have to bring that to us and figure out how we can mitigate the risk to you and yourself, because, you know, obviously we value you as an employee, but we don't want you to make a career-ending move. Okay, so people were asking about some other strategies, and I wanted to just going through the literature the last couple of weeks. I don't know if you belong to the organization Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM. It's a good organization which has a lot of toolkits and research you can download for free. They have a how-to DEI guide, 9 steps. And one of the most important things, and we found this where I used to work as well, the Diversity and Inclusion Unit, they really got management to start tracking data. Okay, how many women are hired? What level are they hired in at? What they're being paid at? What grade level are they paid at? What's their career track through the organization? And, all things being equal, it was really glaring once they looked at that data up close that they did have structural inequalities and said, wow, we really have to do something. So if you've got bean counters who want to look at data, the way to do, satisfy them is to collect the data, and especially the demographic data on pay scales and, and those kinds of things. Also look at retention rates and exit interviews and those types of things. And then so on. Related to your business objectives, get buy-in, communicate the initiatives, measure and disseminate the outcomes, and review and adjust. And so that's kind of the lather, rinse, and repeat kind of shampooed directions. You're never going to get it right. In fact, last year there was a company on a program in the United States called 60 Minutes, and they were interviewing a CEO from a very large software company, and he looked at his data that he had started the company himself, and he found huge inequalities between how women and men were paid in the workforce. And he said, we're going to fix that. So they really made a concerted effort. Within a year, they got everybody equalized in terms of salary and experience, and equal pay for equal work. And then they came back 2 years later and they found that it had just gone to pieces. So just because you do it right one time doesn't mean it's going to last, because you're going to have attrition, turnover. People are going to go in and out of the workplace. People's careers are going to be put on hold. So you always got to constantly evaluate this. We talked about training. A lot of companies are doing implicit bias training, microaggression, cultural competency, respectful workplace. People are looking at social justice. I'm a big advocate of sexual harassment prevention training and anti-retaliation training. One thing that I saw was a great practice. The UN has their management. There's the Secretary General. Every year they have a program, an ethics program, where the president trains his senior staff, and then they train downward, and they give them here's a pre-canned 2-hour session that you can deliver. You have to deliver. It's part of your work program to deliver this. And then you make your sub-managers part of their work plan to deliver this as well. So, it's very hard to change culture, but if you don't have people saying the words and believing it, and you have somebody, and if a manager says to you, I believe in this, and that the organization takes it seriously and has mechanisms for redress and hold people accountable, then the manager can't go back on it, and if they do start acting up, people can go, aha, wait, but this is our values, So I just thought that was another interesting approach. So what other companies I've done, people have diversity compacts, and that's kind of about the numbers, but it's not so much as, okay, it's if you have a qualified pool of candidates, and all things being equal, they're all equal, in terms of experience, qualifications, blah, 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 then give preference to the person who's in disadvantaged group. So it's not favoring a person just because they're disadvantaged for a particular job and hiring somebody because they're less qualified. It means you're just giving preference if they are equal, if the qualifications are equal. Some people are having dialogues on race, and I think you said you were doing this, Claire, in the organization you were talking about. Embedding the DEI messages in core values. Get rid of the idea that we're a meritocracy, because I heard that so many times when I was doing gender equality training. It's like, well, we'd hire more women, but we don't want women, just because they are women. Because we're a meritocracy. And I said, okay, so if we're a meritocracy, that means that every boss you've ever had has been absolutely wonderful, right? And that was kind of the end of the discussion right there. Because it's obvious, we aren't really a meritocracy. There's ways, that people rise, and, there's kind of the old boy network and, and what's rewarded. So it's really, you really got to look at those and challenge some of those sacred cows. recognition and reward ceremonies, speaker series, partnering with employee resource groups. There may be LGBTQ groups, women's groups, minority groups within the company, getting them involved. Then also you might want to look at your recruitment and hiring. So one of the things people do is they try to scrub job announcements to take out, things like aggressive language or, things that kind of would turn off women, or some places have taken names and pictures off resumes because people have biases around that. Don't go always to the best universities for your people. In fact, my previous employer did they had the strategy of hiring just from the best employees. So the head of the D&I office went and looked at, because they were in human resources, they could look at this data, and they said, well, if we got the best people, and they actually, in our belief is that they do better, let's look at the performance appraisals for the past 5 years and see if they actually outperform people who didn't come from those Ivy League schools. And they found no appreciable difference. They didn't get any value added for getting those people from those best companies, best colleges. So that was kind of, just, again, data doesn't lie if you can go to the data. I've seen also programs where they partner with universities, like law schools, and bring in interns. Also, one thing is, stop hiring or stop bringing in unpaid interns, because some people can't afford, not to get paid to work. And you're giving people who can afford that, you're just kind of reinforcing the fact that privileged people have that privilege and can get in. Partner with your, communities, to community outreach to, bring in people from the community, and seeing as your organization as a place that you could, they could work for. And I would say also end referral programs, right? Because if you give cash bonuses to refer somebody, you're going to get people who who are going to probably be like you, who you're comfortable working with, so you're not going to get the diversity. And as I said, working with specialist headhunters, and then again, lather, rinse, repeat. This is not a one-off thing. Okay, and training, there's compliance-based training. We talked about that, it's ineffective. If you embed it into the culture and make it one part of your whole D&I strategy, also customize it and have role plays. The thing about sexual harassment training we found is e-learning isn't going to do it. You have to put people in a situation where they can feel what it feels like to be the person on the receiving end of unwanted behavior. And when you do that, and we design role plays like that, people really said, I never got it until I was put in that situation as a person being the object of unwelcome behavior. It really made me feel uncomfortable, and I felt threatened and scared, and I had no idea that, seemingly innocent, comments could have that effect on people. So I think Claire mentioned this. Dialogue, people are doing this nowadays. This was just an SHRM has an article about this. I was going to show you this video. One of the things that we got in a lot of our D&E training was, okay, our culture is okay, but that culture, they're prejudiced against women, or this or that or that. And he for she is a movement, the United Nations Women's Organization, where they get men to take the challenge of being allies for diversity and inclusion and gender equality. And so I can give you this slideshow and the references, and you can take a look at it. It's very powerful. It's about one college student in Amman, Jordan, who he managed to get 10,000 of his male classmates to sign, I'm going to be an ally for gender equality. That's basically it. I had a smile sheet. If I did poor, so or great, you could go ahead and do that. Always interested in your feedback. And then finally, thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope we got your expectations met by this talk. And if you have any questions, follow up with me at at workingwithrespect.com, and I said I'll be happy to send you the slideshow and then also the bibliography that I've been keeping for it's on sexual harassment, diversity and inclusion, gender equality. I just went over 1,000 entries, news articles, research papers, and those kinds of things. So happy to share that.
Kurt, we would love all that, the slides, the video, so we can watch that, and the bibliography. The content here has been so wide and so deep. I have loved, especially, you know, the things that have stuck in my mind, the stories, the terminology as well. And my biggest takeaway is, imagine if this was all in behavioural competency frameworks and job descriptions and performance management.
Exactly.
As this is measured. And if it's measured, then we would, in Arabic, we say shway shway. So slowly, slowly, we would get systemic change.
Yeah.
That was amazing. We really appreciate your time. Stay with us for the next session. We have the last session of the day. We have Juan Pablo Atero with us.